Hi guys, welcome to Manhood Explained. My name is Camille and today is 15th of February 2020. Welcome to live number 50. And I want to ask you, have you ever thought about, what is the basis of all of this? And when you feel like you try to get and make sense of all of this, how are you supposed to do this whole thing, and then what is the goal of it? Have you ever thought what would be that goal? What would be the basis that you have to build this whole thing on, so for all of this to make sense? So this is exactly what we're going to talk about today. I want to talk about where does the real manhood starts and where does it lead. And for those of you who know me, or for those of you who listen to the lives that I recorded before, you know that I've got kind of substantial exposure to religion, and to be exact, it's Christianity and Protestant kind of version of it. And interestingly enough, I don't really talk about this because you're not here for the theology lesson, but because some of those things happen, and the thing that I'm going to talk about I basically took from my years of being in that, and this whole idea was born there. I'll just tell you a brief story, so bear with me. You see, the whole thing about God and believing in God is kind of crazy, because when you go through all of this as I did, and I read the Bible from cover to cover many times, starting from my childhood, when you start to see what kind of person kind of stands out when you read this book in comparison to this theory about this guy, sitting on a cloud and shooting people with thunderbolts, and basically making people pay for something that he calls sin, it's completely crazy. It's completely not comparable. And if you look at how he kind of says who he is, when you read the Bible, the book of Christianity, basically, is that he says that he is not even having love, that he is love. And then if you've got some exposure, you know that they say that he is the King of Kings, Lord of Lords. But I don't remember when, but it just came to my mind to think about one thing. What if, and what does it mean, if he would be Father of Fathers? Because, we call him Father. But what does it mean, and what does it say? How that would change not only my kind of view on him, but what does it mean, and how that would change my look on everything that I do, if I would kind of accept this fact about him and accept this fact about who I want to be. Because you've got to understand, if you're trying to define who is the Father of Fathers, meaning that he is the biggest role model for every father alive. So then you have to ask yourself the question: what does it mean that someone would be like the best version of the father that you ever wanted? That's definitely not someone who is just allowing you to do whatever you want, because you're gonna quickly come to conclusion that it's not the way to live your life. So then you understand that this person would have to be really smart, really experienced, obviously very loving and caring for you, but also someone who is able to mentor you, someone who is able to teach you about things that you want to accomplish in your life, because he or she is already there. Because I want to move towards rather this father figure in this kind of more abstract concept rather than God himself, because that's completely different story in some respect. But the whole idea is that this kind of person would have to be somewhere in the middle, in between love, but kind of wise love, not this stupid version of love of this angel, curly haired one who just shoots everybody with arrows of love, and people acting like they lost their minds. But I'm saying about love which is caring, but also requiring of you to kind of act wise, to it's like an accountability person, someone who not only teaches you and tells you about life and loves you and so on, but also requires from you for you to make progress. And when I start to think about him, and God, and my whole thing about my being not a religious person, but kind of being in all of this changed the whole perspective on how I look at God and religion itself. But then going back towards myself and towards what I want to talk about today, it changed how I looked at myself and how I build my relationship with basically everyone. Because I started to think, what would happen and how would that change myself and my relationship to my wife, relationship to my friends, relationship to basically everyone, if I'll try to be this kind of person. And you start to understand that a few things will have to happen. First of all, if you want to be this kind of role model, you'll have to put pedal to the metal to build yourself, to spend time to get as wise as you can, as experienced as you can, as honest as you can, especially towards yourself. And you have to raise the bar of every positive thing that you can, and it will require a lot of work from you. But interestingly enough, if you look at how we see people who we treat like heroes, or like fathers of state, or some people that are kind of role models for us as a humanity, or not only the generation, but humanity by itself. All of those people took years to build who they are. It's, I don't know, you can take anyone, Nelson Mandela. He spent tons of years in prison. Mother Teresa, she built her position by helping others for years. And you can go and on, and the people from different areas, it will show you that it takes time to build yourself to be this kind of role model for others. But interestingly enough, all of them use this kind of power, and I don't want to go political because there are different stories about different people, but the whole idea is that you build yourself to the level that you are really a giant in comparison to others. But then you use this power not to gain the acknowledgement or gain the power, above the or power on the people by fear, but basically by serving. And it's interesting because if you do this, and I remember talking and thinking about it and talking with people about it more than 16 years ago. So even if I'll be complete idiot again, I would have to learn something for all of these years. And interestingly enough, I'm light years from being this kind of person. But it taught me a lot about how do you supposed to look at people, how do you supposed to look at relationship. And interestingly enough, it teaches you a lot about being observant. It teaches you a lot, to be quiet and to listen. And then you start to see, who act like kids and child. You can see the child running here and there, and you see, how adorable they are, being children. But then you start to see that the same kind of behavior you can see in people who are 30, who are 40, who are 50, who are 60. And then you start to, it starts to be obvious for you that there are people who are adult in their years, but they are complete kids and immature people, how they act. Then you start to understand why so many wise people say that whatever you do or whatever you say, it says more about you. Because you kind of like market your ignorance or market your stupidity by the way you act and by the way you speak about anything, basically. And then you start to see who's really your friend. Because then you start to see that there are people who are genuinely, want to spend time with you, they like you. But there are those who are there just because they can gain something from being with you. And then you can just list your best friends, so-called, and you start to see which of those people really knows who you are. Which of these people really knows what are your dreams, what are your regrets, what do you really want? Maybe, and who of them is able to ask you how you're doing, what's your progress, if you're doing something with which maybe they're not agreeing with. And then you start to see that there's not many people who are able to be there with you just because they want to be with you and they want to know who you are and they want to be your real friends. But then on a positive note, it's interesting because you start to see that the more you experience life, the more you are more adult in how you see the world, how you experience it, then you start to see that you're able to help other people. just by being you, because you experience so many things that they're starting to experience, because they are years behind you. Maybe, I had people who I invested in very much, being now 10, 15 years younger than me, and it's so rewarding to helping to investing in them, to kind of supporting them, and to encourage them in doing some things. And you can see that how fast you're able to build relationships. And even, you don't put anything on yourself. You don't say that you're going to mentor them, because my motto is like, what do I know about life? But then many things I can see, and then it's so awesome to see that they make progress, and then you can build relationships. But some of these people are not able to manage that. They are not able to handle you just giving them something for nothing, because you don't want anything from them. But it's so rewarding. And then you start to see that the more you raise your level, the easier for you it is to manage every struggle, every argument, and it goes towards the relationship. When you raise your levels of basically everything that you can raise your level in, then you start to see that if you keep yourself clear as a whistle, if you do everything to be the most righteous person around, then you start to see that if there's nothing that someone can hold against you, then you don't have to argue, because you don't have to get nervous or angry or whatever, just because it's not my fault. So then just ask simple questions without any negative emotions attached to it, like, do you really want me to treat you like you treated me, like a minute ago? Is that my fault or your fault? So if it's your fault, why are you screaming at me? And then you start to see that this whole manhood that I talked about for the last 49 lives, it's not about being this macho who just basically takes the authority by force. But if you kind of take time to build yourself to be this kind of person who's really knowledgeable and experienced, and then you lead by example, then you just lead by example, and people start to line up behind you, just because you are this kind of person. Then they cannot show you your mistakes, or even if they can, they see that you openly say, I'm sorry, my fault. You learn and you make progress. But then, especially in a relationship, it's so important, because then you start to see that you start to lead not because you want to, but because that's the result of you being the best version of yourself, and you become this giant in your house, in your relationship. And then you just do everything just because you love them, just because you care. And it has tremendous change in the way you think. If you start to put this weight on you, then the relationship, it's not their problem, it's your problem. It's your goal to make it work. And you're going to do it by raising your standards, not trying to change them, but trying to change yourself. And everything comes around, everything comes together, it makes sense. So this is what I want you to take basically from this video. That at least for me, manhood starts, leads, and ends in your understanding that the whole idea is to build yourself, to become this giant, in the positive sense, the toughest guy on the block. In everything, raising standards of your humility, raising standards of your wisdom, of your experience, of your understanding, of you being able to lead, of you being able to make tough decisions, of you being able to be the most caring person around. Because then you're not leading people by fear, by grabbing their respect, because you're trying to scare them, but by channeling your greatness to help those who are in need, especially those that you're in love with, and especially those who are your family. Because you've got to understand, the end means of every progress is contribution. So, in simple terms, for me, you're a man if you're giant who serves because you care. Think about it, do something about it, and see you tomorrow.